I just want to point out that I'm not here to give out rulings or fatwa in relation to dating, courtship, marriage. I'm in no shape, or I don't have the capacity to do that. So just putting that out there, it's essentially I'm hoping to keep things real, as in real talk, because, well, for me, when it comes to relationships in our community, predominantly in the Indian subcontinent sort of community, what the background that I'm from, dating is like, if you hear the word dating, it's just like haram, like end of. Well, that's the sort of background that I'm from. So again, just to reiterate, I'm not here to give out rulings about dating. It's just something that I'm quite passionate about, as in courtship. And that's what I'll be talking about, inshallah. So, a bit about myself. I am a teacher by profession, but commitments change things. Alhamdulillah, Allah blessed me with a wonderful wife. And now we have another, well, not another wife, just the one. Otherwise I won't be here right now. We have baby Musa, alhamdulillah, that joined the family 3 weeks ago. Allah protect him and preserve him. So after getting married, I knew that I had to up the game in terms of finance, and Allah blessed me with the opportunity to set up my own business. So I run a digital printing business and a sign business in Leicestershire, but at the same time I take part in youth work, most of the time at the Islamic Foundation and the city retreat in the city of Leicester, and I give the khutbah at both places from time to time. It's something that me and Amara talk about very often, if not all the time, to the point where we set up an Instagram page to speak about relationships and just our relationship in general and how things worked out for us. See, when I got to a point where but I started to think about sex and intimacy, and that was fairly young, around 14, 15. For some of us it may be younger, and for some maybe a bit later than that. There wasn't much out there in the community for me to explore the concept of intimacy, as in Islam. Well, the scholars were there, our teachers were there, but it was very difficult to relate. And it was hard for me to have that conversation with my teachers. I went to an Islamic school. I went to a Darul Uloom. So they would mention the ahadith, and they would read out the Qur'an, the verses of Qur'an about love and marriage. And we were taught that you'd meet your spouse and you get to see her once, and then that's it. You have to say yes or no, or then you move on. There was no courtship. Engagement was impermissible, forbidden. You can't get to know your spouse. Love comes after marriage, that sort of thing. And it was all confusing for me, because it doesn't make sense to rock up to your wedding not having seen your spouse, and then you're, intended to sleep with them afterwards or have intimate relationship with them straight after. Doesn't make sense. You don't know them. You don't know one another. You don't know how you feel about each other. You're told that so-and-so from Bradford is coming and you're going to see them. It can be like that. It can be like East is East, Dad's got somebody ready for you and you're going to get married. In some communities, it's still like that. And in others, within the subcontinent communities, it's not as bad, but it's still there. And there's that stigma surrounding courtship, surrounding that engagement period, getting to know your spouse, your partner. And my personal experience really hones in on this. I come from a very strong conservative Muslim background. And don't get me wrong, my parents gave me the opportunity to explore and to have friends from the opposite gender, because even that's looked down upon in some family households as well. In our Asian communities, predominantly Indian and Pakistani communities. But alhamdulillah, my parents gave me that freedom freedom to go out, freedom to spend time with friends outside to a certain time. But at the same time, when it came to the discussion of marriage, it was you find someone, you meet them 2-3 times, and then you do your nikah, and then you can legalize everything. Nikah legalizes everything. Nikah is your ticket to intimacy, to kissing, to hugging, to sexual relations with your spouse. And then you can get to know them afterwards. Logically, when you think about that, when you just think about, take a second to think about that you're told that you can have the intimacy and then you get to know each other. It doesn't make sense to be intimate with someone from experience. I know it's only been 3 years, well, 5 years since knowing Amara. It took time for me and her to get to know each other verbally, get to know one another and how we feel, our likes and our dislikes. But again, within the perimeters of khitbah, within the perimeters of courtship. And courtship exists in Islam. It's just unfortunate that it's been buried and sand's been put over it and it's been cemented, and it's like it doesn't exist. And this is something that I really passionately would like to revive within our communities. And I would love to engage our young people in this sort of discussion in our local, as in masajids, in our community centers. So when I first met Amara, well, I met her mum first, and I was quite pally with her mum, really good friends with her mum, to the point where Amara was like, "Mum, you're hanging out with a 21-year-old boy, what's going on?" He's 21 years old, you're married, you've got 5 kids, you know? And I was tutoring her brothers at the time. And I had a part-time job. I was also a madrasa teacher, and I was working at a paint shop, selling paint, part-time. And it just so happened that her mum would constantly say, "Idris, are you on the market? Idris, are you on the market?" And at that time, I'd just come back from leading Taraweeh in France, in Lyon. And before that, I was in a toxic relationship, a shady one that was hidden from mum and dad because, well, it's haram in Islam. To the point where the person that I was with, we were on the verge of doing a nikah, an aqd, in private, because it's, you know, just to legalize things. But then, alhamdulillah, I knew that there was a lot of toxicity there, and Allah is the best of planners. So from that, I kind of left that, went to France with my friend, a good friend of mine. After I came back from France, it was, let's just see how it goes. I didn't intend on getting married. I just thought when the person comes, they'll come. And I wasn't fixated on the idea, the concept of the one. It wasn't, oh, the one's going to turn up and that's it. There's going to be flowers flying everywhere, and there's going to be, you know, Cupid's going to be there with his bow and arrow, and that's it, you know. Love at first sight. It was more spending time with Amara's family, and that's how I kind of got to know about Amara indirectly. And I think I give credit to her mum for doing that, because she knew that there was something there between me and her. We didn't know. Her parents knew that there was something there between them, between me and her. And then after her mum asking me, I gave it good thought, and I saw characteristics in Amara which I grew really fond of. But at that point, I hadn't really sat down and spoke to her directly. But I felt in my heart that she is the right person and I want to take it further. So I spoke to her mum directly. I said to her, "Look, I'm fond of your daughter and I want to take things further, but with your consent," as in openly, transparently. And I think this is something that we as a community, we lack this transparency with our parents, this trust factor. From a young age, it's more, not to paint everybody with the same brush, but we're grown up. Well, I was brought up in an environment where it was hear and obey. There was love there, but at the same time, there was that fear that if you didn't do it, you're in trouble. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't work that way. He enforces, you want to obey Him because you love Him. And that's kind of how you want to do the same thing when it comes to your parents as well, or as being parents. And it's painstaking, and there can be a delay in that process. I know I'm going on a tangent here, but it's important that I make I make mention of this, that if you want to instill that obedience, it's through love, not through fear. So back to myself and speaking with Amara's mum. After that, her mum spoke to her dad, and then her dad sat down with me. And straight up, as in for the young people, straight up he said, do you have a job? Can you take care of my daughter the way I take care of her? Can you hold the job? I don't care if you're stacking shelves in Tesco. I don't care what you do. But so long as you can take care of my daughter, that's enough for me. And he knew as well, he did his research into me and who I was. So you could say it was a semi-arranged marriage. Because thereafter, her mum and dad gave us the space, and my parents as well, but it was hard to get them to get to this point. As much as I love them to bits, and my parents. But giving us the opportunity to get to know one another in this transparent, trustworthy, open environment. And I feel like this is what we lack in society, within our Muslim community, predominantly Muslim communities. There's not that trust for our young people. So that's why they go behind our backs, or they keep it in the dark, or they do these nikah on the side, the act on the side. So we were somewhat engaged or in courtship for roughly about 2 years, and then we got married. And we had, you could say ups and downs, but it was more about getting to really know each other. But within boundaries. So we'd go out for coffee, we'd go out for lunch during the day, and her dad would get a phone call from somebody, because Leicester isn't such a big city, that Amara and Idris are out having a coffee. He's like, yeah, I know. Because he came home and he said to me that he's taking her out for lunch. So I made it a point that if I was taking her out for lunch, I would tell him. If I was taking her out for dinner, I would tell him and mum and say, look, this is what we want to do. We're going here. So there was that transparency from the beginning, and that's because there was that love there. There was that love there. And I feel like if we don't instill that love within our children, for parents, as in, I can finally say for parents, you know, it will be difficult. It will be difficult for them to trust us. And it's not easy. Again, it's not easy to build that, to put that love in them so that they can trust us, and then we can trust them. But once we do, then naturally when you're out there, as hard as it is to hold back your desire, it's natural human desire to want to be intimate. It's natural human desire to want to be intimate. You'll hold back because you know that your mum and dad, not just for your mum and dad, for Allah and for yourself, you're holding yourself back. Because you have a higher purpose afterwards. And that's the difference between, well, for me, that's the difference between courtship and dating. Courtship is more with the intention of knowing that there's a higher divine purpose that's going to follow courtship. You are going to get married. So, essentially, what I'm trying to say is that we need to stop shaming our young people. If anything, we need to sit down and talk to them and understand what they're feeling intimately. For example, sexuality and intimacy. It's not discussed enough in our community with our young people, with boys and with girls, with both genders. We have to discuss these sort of intimate concepts, because if we don't, they will look for it elsewhere, and they do look for it elsewhere, and then we complain about their behavior afterwards, and that's because we didn't give them the opportunity to speak to us about these issues. So going back to her dad telling me that I can marry her, but I need to work. I need to have I need to have a roof over her head, essentially. Why I point this out is because currently there's this phenomena in our community, and this is the crux of what I'm trying to get across tonight, is that our young people now have decided that by doing a nikah, it legalizes the kissing, the hugging, the cuddling, and going as far as the nocturnal antics that happen in the evening or in the daytime, whatever suits you. But by doing so, they have completely disregarded the weightiness and the significance of zawaj, of marriage. Because their excuse is, well, I'm studying, so I've got to pay off some debts. I haven't got a solid job. I've only got, say, £500 in my account, so I can't really support her. I can't really support my spouse or my partner. But I want the kissing and the hugging and the intimacy. So let's get married. Let's do a nikah to legalize this. Let's do the contract to legalize it. And unfortunately, well, obviously within English law, the nikah, it doesn't hold that significance anyway. That's one. Number two, you're downplaying the whole notion of zawaj, of marriage. Because you're bringing it down to just intimacy, just the kissing, just the hugging, when there's a lot more than that. I know some people may have a difference of opinion, but to me personally, if you are going to get married, it's all or nothing. You go in completely. And you don't need that much money. Well, to me, I had nothing. I was a chaiwala. I was the first chaiwala, by the way. All the, you know the chaiwala that you know of? I was the first chaiwala. So it has to start somewhere. I was making tea at 6 o'clock in the morning and coming home at 3. And then going to teach at a local madrasa. And then going after that to give tuition. Because I had to make ends meet. But I knew that that was my responsibility. And I tell you, there was so much enjoyment and happiness in that. And there was so much appreciation from my spouse because of that. Think about it, if our young people, they go and get a nikah done like this. Imagine you've had an intimate relationship with now your partner because of nikah. And then you have to go home and sleep in your own bed. Really? You should be sharing the same bed afterwards. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't seem right. It shouldn't feel right because it's not the way it's supposed to be done. And for me, that's the main sort of message that I want to get across today, and that is that we need to revive this sunnah of courtship. It is part of the sunnah. Allah's Messenger ﷺ, when he knew of a Sahaba that was wanting to get married, he said, go and see her so you can, if there is love there, if you're going to feel love for her, you will feel it when seeing her. You know? And at the same time, we don't want it to be where the significance and the weightiness of nikah, it loses that weightiness. If anything, we need to bring back that weightiness and the honor that nikah holds, the marriage contract. That it's not just so you can kiss and hug and you can have intimate relations with your partner or your spouse. It's so you can build a solid foundation for a family in the future, if Allah wills. It's so you can build a community. Essentially, a marriage isn't just a marriage for yourself. You're building and you're giving back to your community, because you will have children, or you yourself, your partner and yourself will be giving back to them. It's part of life. It's part of being in this world. As Professor Ibrahim Musa said, we're all Khalifa, we're all, as in, given that responsibility to take care of this world. And it's part of that cycle, it's part of that process. So I hope that in the future, especially the young people, we can revive the concept of courtship, getting to know a potential spouse, partner, in the right way, in a civil way, without losing each other's dignity. And at the same time, when it comes to getting married, you're all in or nothing. Thank you.